Hey guys, welcome back to the Captain's Corner Pod. I am your co-host or co-pilot, Ray Russell here. Gonna try and help to guide the plane this week. But in order to find out what's going on the latest in the world of the Captain's Corner Pod and the Portland Wrestling Expo for that matter, let's bring him back onto the show, Captain Nick Masci himself, and it's time to ask that ever-important question. What's happening, Captain?
Ahoy, mateys. What's going on, First Mate Ray? Happy to start September with you as we start to wind down the year. September, in my mind, we're finishing up that last 3 to 4 months of the year, and we're going to finish up strong, not only with all of our signings, but also on the Captain's Corner podcast. So looking forward to today, and we've got a very special guest coming up.
Oh, we do indeed. I'm looking forward to this one because this is kind of a under the covers type of guy who's been around the business for a very long time. He worked pretty much every territory, and he certainly worked the Portland territory. I'm sure we'll get into that, but also Puerto Rico and Florida. Spent a lot of time in the 90s working for the WCW, and I'm talking about Ricky Santana. Very much looking forward to this one.
We talked a few weeks ago to Ricky's good friend, the Cuban assassin, a.k.a. Top Gun. And Ricky may be coming to the Portland Wrestling Expo, too. We'll have to wait and see on that. But Ricky had one of those amazing careers where he wrestled every territory, nearly every territory in the continental United States, a bunch of promotions in Japan, Puerto Rico, Mexico, the kind of career that you don't see anymore. This is what Ricky Santana had, an amazing career. And we're going to have Ricky on, and we'll be able to touch base on a lot of the territories and places he's worked in, been throughout his entire professional wrestling career.
Yeah, once you told me we were getting Ricky Santana on the show this week, I did jot down a few questions. A couple of them, not going to lie, I've had in my head for years, and a few of them I started Googling through, not his Wikipedia, but just some of the matches and things that he had, and I added a couple extra questions there. So if time permits, I'm looking forward to asking him a few of those, see if we can get him in. And yeah, just looking forward to that part of the show. But before Ricky comes on, I got to ask you, Nick, what's been going on in the world of Captain's Corner? What do you got upcoming now?
Wow. So we just finished, of course. So we had our signing with Kenta at the end of August, and that went fantastic. International superstar Kenta. We did a signing in conjunction with MLW's Super Show in Queens, New York, and that went great. And actually, since then, on the public and private signing front, been a little empty. We did a big box break on some AAA Panini cards from 2019 last week, which had the rookie cards of Tessa Blanchard, Taya Valkyrie, Brian Cage, Killer Cross, a lot of big names from today. And, of course, Pentagon, Phoenix, Aerostar, Vikingo. So a lot of the Lucha Stars of today, too, had their rookie cards set. That was a great time. And coming up this weekend, we're back on the road. We've got Captain's Corner favorite, Ivelisse Velez, that'll be with us. And we'll be putting some miles in as we're going to go from Springfield, Mass. to northern New York, upstate New York. And we're going to be at the Immortal Championship Wrestling Show. And she's in the main event against Courageous Christina Marie, who's been the Immortal Championship Wrestling Women's Champion for maybe 7 or 8 months now. And then the cool thing after that, Ray, is that we're doing a virtual with both competitors in the main event. And then back to Springfield at Zombie Hideout on Sunday, September 15th. So that's coming up in the immediate future. Also have the Outrunners from AEW that are coming up. I know if you're listening and you're a fan of the 80s stuff like Ray and myself are, I think you'll enjoy the Outrunners. They have that old school vibe to them. Really colorful gear, similar to that Midnight Express 89, 90 gear, but their personalities are larger than life and they really stand out, especially in today's environment. So that's what's coming up in the immediate future. You know, I'm looking forward to it because after September, convention season's right around the corner, Ray. Oh, yeah. We got the Wrestling Classic in Springfield, Mass. on Saturday, November 16th.
Wow. You sound like a busy boy. You know, you try, well, we don't have a whole lot coming up and then rambling all that off. I love it here.
Yeah, I know. You ask me for a bit, I'll give you a lot.
No. Well, I certainly, enjoy following you on the Facebook and seeing everything you have going on. And that's why I wanted to ask you here, because sometimes I miss the drops and I don't know. And then, you kind of surprise me. You're like, oh, I'm doing this. And I go, no shit. Right. So it's kind of cool to get the feedback here on the shows for everybody else who maybe doesn't even dive into social media. Right. So they have the Captain's Corner podcast now as their way to listen and just kind of hear everything going on in the world of the Captain's Corner. So very cool. Looking forward to that. And Ivelisse, we had her on the GrappleCon cast as well.
She sure did.
She's a fun chica.
She sure is. And we've worked with Ivelisse before. very talented in the ring, very open and honest outside the ring. And as a reminder, she was one of our guests on the first season of the Glory Days Grapple Concast. I got to get on the horn to Barry Rose. It's been overdue, but I think season 2 should be dropping at some point in this fall. So keep your fingers crossed on that one to everyone in the listening audience.
Sounds fun. Well, you talked about Ricky Santana going to be coming up here on the show, and you talked about him potentially being part of that Portland Wrestling Expo. So I got to ask you, do you have anything you want to reveal right now as part of the Portland Wrestling Expo? Anything new to report, or at least at the very least, you want to give us any more details in regards to where it is again? Let everybody know, remind everyone what's going on with it.
The Portland Wrestling Expo is the Pacific Northwest first wrestling convention in quite a long time. We're very happy to be running it, Captain's Corner running the convention. And that's going to be on Saturday, February 22nd. And it's at the Holiday Inn Portland Airport. And we previously announced some Portland flavor. So with Top Gun, with sheep herder Luke Williams, Kiwi sheep herder Luke Williams, and the Grappler as 3 of our feature guests from Portland's past. We are also going to have someone that had an amazing career, although he never worked for Don Owen and the Owens family, and that's Rikishi. Rikishi's our most recent announcement at the Portland Wrestling Expo. WWE Hall of Famer. Of course, the Samoan SWAT team, I think, was one of the most underrated tag teams of the 80s, 90s. So good as Fatu, and of course with his cousin Samu, and then became a Hall of Famer during the Attitude Era as Rikishi. So he will be our first vendor guest that we've announced. We've got a bunch of other names to announce. We may get confirmation from a certain upcoming guest about him appearing in Portland on February 22nd. But the news is coming hot and heavy. Tickets are going to go on sale this upcoming Friday, and that's going to be September 20th. And we're going to announce in the next couple of days all the different ticket packages for the Pro Wrestling Expo. We've got something in everyone's budget, so make sure to stay tuned in the Captain's Facebook or the Captain's Instagram for that news when it drops.
Very, very cool. And it's cool to hear Rikishi going to be out there. While he wasn't really a Portland mainstay, he was a West Coaster, right? He grew up in San Francisco, and even Afa and Sika, the old stories of them going to the Cow Palace as fans and wanting to attack all of the heels who were beating up High Chief Peter Maivia. And as the story goes, these heels and these security guards who were trying to hold Afa and Sika back as fans came to Peter Maivia and said, "You got to get these guys trained. They're going to kill us." So that's kind of how the story is anyway, if you believe urban legend. It is what it is, and the rest is history. Unfortunately, we just lost Afa and Sika, but their successors live on and on, as we see right now in the WWE. But it's very cool to have Rikishi out there. One of my favorites growing up, my favorite head shrinker, my favorite. Everybody always had like a favorite of every tag team, right? And so Fatu was always my favorite of the Samoan SWAT team and whatnot. And to see him in WCW, absolutely underrated. By the time they got to the WWF, there really wasn't a whole lot for them to work with, right, on the other side. So the tag team division, if they could have been there in 89 when all the Bull, or even 88 with the Bulldogs, 89 with the Hearts and the Rockers, my God.
Rockers? My God, them and the Rockers would have been so much fun. And then, like you said, in 92, 93, 94, the tag team division dropped off quite a bit, but they were still doing some awesome stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That big splash from the top to the outside, like I can close my eyes and see it.
Yes, and I've heard the story. Tommy Dreamer's told the story. He had a dark match on that TV taping to try to, get a job with the WWF. And his dark match was right after that set of tapings. And Fatu does the dive off the top rope to the outside, unsanctioned, and he did not clarify that with anybody prior to doing it. And Vince McMahon sees it and just shuts everything down, loses his mind. What the fuck was that, pal? Just shut everything down for like 20 minutes. And so when they got everything back up and running again, they didn't have time for Tommy Dreamer's dark match. So indirectly,
that's funny.
Yeah.
So an interesting thing is one of those what ifs. I've worked with Samu quite a bit, and after 88, 89, the Samoan SWAT team were a thing. Jim Crockett Promotions into the NWA and then becoming WCW. They actually stopped teaming for a little bit.
Yes.
Samu was a single, and Fatu and then the Samoan Savage Tonga Kid were a team.
Right.
Sam and Yokozuna were actually a team in New Japan and some of the other independent companies in the wild. And Samu was telling me actually that initially they wanted him and Yoko to be the head shrinkers, and Rikishi Fatu was going to be the single.
Okay.
And then Vince saw the size of Yoko Rodney, and he was like, oh, no, I think we could do something a little different.
Look at him, pal. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I remember the stories, Nick, coming in there at that time. I remember the stories saying that there were going to be 3 head shrinkers. And, and we see the tryouts. They're out there in the hidden gyms or whatever of Yokozuna getting that tryout as the Kokina. But, it didn't take long. Vince got to look at him, and, absolutely. The rest is history. Yeah,
right. Well, what if though, right? If get Kokina Rodney is teaming with Sam at first. Who does anyone wind up doing that Yokozuna character? Huh?
Yeah, it's a lot of what ifs, but I think everything worked out for the best in all of that situation. Absolutely. Oh, it looks like our guest may have arrived here, Nick. All right, let's welcome him in. Ricky Santana, former Mr. Everything, every title in Puerto Rico, every title in Portland. I mean, Florida, WCW, one half of the Barrio Brothers. We just had Fidel Sierra on here a couple weeks ago. Welcome onto the show, Ricky Santana.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to reminisce about the days of old, for sure.
I love it. Old time rock and roll.
Well, Ray, we did have Fidel Sierra on, but we also had Top Gun on.
Yes, we did.
We can't forget that. Now, Top Gun's coming to the Portland Wrestling Expo on Saturday, February 22nd. And Ricky, I got to ask you, are you open that weekend? Because I think there may be some people in the Portland area that may want to see Ricky Santana return.
Well, I'm always available for a fan, and especially the fans of the Northwest. I did spend a lot of time out there for Don Owen, who just, in my opinion, happens to be one of the best payoff guys during the territory days, along with Paul Bosch. And I think it would be available. I mean, yeah, I'd say so. I'd make room to go out to Portland again and see all those great fans if there was an opportunity for me to do that.
I think we're going to have to make it official then. Ricky Santana is the newest announcement for the Portland Wrestling Expo,
awesome.
Saturday, February 22nd. If you're listening to the podcast, you just got some breaking news.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it too. I'm looking forward to heading out to the Pacific Northwest. Some great fans, some great memories, a lot of great talent that went through that territory, a who's who. If you look back, you have, you mentioned Top Gun, you mentioned me, but going back, you got Dynamite Kid, you had Rip Oliver, you had the Grappler, Len Denton, you had Colonel De Beers, you had Buddy Rose, you had Jimmy Snuka, you had Kurt Hennig. The list goes on and on. It was a great territory. The trips were nice and short, and I really enjoyed myself out there through the years that I was through the 80s and the 90s. That sounds a long time ago, doesn't it?
Well, it's my favorite era, so.
Yeah, our favorite era. Now, Ricky, before the first time you got to Portland, do you remember who it was that, told you, hey, listen, there's an opening for Don Owen, or was it just some place that was always kind of in your mind of a place to potentially go to?
I always wanted to work the majority of the territories because that's what I grew up on watching, especially here in Florida, championship wrestling from Florida. Fidel Sierra was the gentleman who actually made the connection for me to go out there back in the mid-'80s.
Well, I was, earlier today, I was scrolling through because I have a lot of the footage from Puerto Rico, anywhere between 1982 and 1991. I have a lot of it on video. And obviously you came through there quite a few times. You held pretty much every title there. But one of the titles you held was the Puerto Rican Championship. You were 5-time champion. You worked with Bobby Jaggers, Hercules Ayala, Viano 3. But the first time you won the belt, or maybe lost, I can't remember off the top of my head, but you did work the first time you were champion with a guy by the name at that time of the Super Black Ninja, who would go on to become the Great Muta. And I don't know if you crossed paths with him when you were in Florida, but I wanted to get your memories of working with Muta early on.
Night Off, I first came across Muta in the Florida territory before he had gone to Puerto Rico a couple years prior to that, and then ended up seeing him again in Puerto Rico. Came in, did beat him for the Puerto Rican title. Mm-hmm. And then I met up with him again in WCW, So, I mean, it was a night off for me. Great talent. He's one of a kind. He's definitely one of a kind. And I'm proud to say that I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of one-of-a-kinds throughout my career. A lot of the Hall of Famers and the who's who in this business I have stepped in the ring with.
Now, Ricky, we're going to take it back a bit. And what I mean by that is that, Ricky, we were talking before you came in, you had such an amazing career. You worked nearly every territory in the United States, a bunch of different promotions in Japan, Mexico, Puerto Rico. But a lot of people may not know, because it was under a different name, you were a part of the WWF during that national expansion, 84, 85. Why don't you talk about being involved in that all? And I mean, that time in wrestling is so unique, because Vince is coming in, he's expanding, he's going to a lot of places he wasn't before. You were involved and working on a lot of those shows. So why don't you tell some memories of that time?
Well, you know, the most famous memory that I was there is when Randy Savage came in, and they were doing this whole thing for picking out his new manager. And I had his first match, you know, with him. And it turned out for the best for me, because it gave me, you know, me starting out into the business, it gave me an opportunity to work with some of those, you know, great names in the business. And then on top of that, I had Bret Hart's first match. But the story behind Bret was, you know, it had been a couple of, you know, months and time had gone by, and I put everybody and their mother over, you know, in the beginning, right? So then I come into Poughkeepsie, and there's the 3 weeks of TV up on there, and I see Bret Hart. Well, I didn't know about the Calgary territory because I wasn't exposed to it. So I'm thinking, well, damn, I'm finally going to get a win on TV with, you know, this guy named Bret Hart, you know. So, you know, I get out there, and, you know, we had a match, and, you know, I put Bret over. Needless to say, you know, history speaks for itself. But, you know, I told Bret that story that I told him. I said, hey, you know what? I saw your name on the thing, and I said, well, I don't know, who's Bret Hart, right? And I'm going to get a victory here on the Superstar show, and no.
So it all started, his big career all started in the WWF with Aldo Marino across the ring.
Yes,
for those who don't know, that was Ricky Santana's name in the WWF. And you talked about maybe one of the most famous matches you were involved in or around was the Randy Savage match. Well, the first thing I think of when I think of Aldo Marino in the WWF ring is a guy by the name of Terry Funk.
With Melvin in the hat, yes.
So I had to ask you, how much of that, and I'm sure it wasn't planned, but how much of that were you just shocked as this went on? Terry Funk gets in the ring, Mel Phillips puts on his cowboy hat, and Funk goes to town on you, on Mel Phillips. Was there any heat on Terry coming out of that? Because it seemed very much ad lib.
You know, with Terry, he would give you like the intricate pointer, and you had to read in between the lines.
Okay.
He said, you know, Sonny, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do something with Melvin, and when you think it's the right time, you come over and start kicking my ass, and then I'll decide to stop you when I feel it's right, and then I'll kick your ass, and then we'll get the hell out of there. And I said, okay, you know, I mean, what am I supposed to do, right? Sure. I just want to be a part of the show and grow with all those things, you know, and I got to work with Terry, I got to work with Bret, I got to work with Randy. And the thing that really got me over the most, which sent me on the territory run, you know, the Briscoes were in, Steamboat was in, Valentine was in, and all those guys. And the funny part about it is Jerry come up to me, and he saw that I was working with Valentine. And he says, hey, you do me a favor? I said, sure, no problem, Jerry. Well, what do you need? He says, listen, you know how Greg hits you with that big forearm across the chest? I said, yeah. He says, I just need you to say something witty, a little bit sarcastic, but nothing disrespectful. I said, okay. I'm a young kid. I don't know any better. We go up in the ring. Greg rears back with that forearm, and he hits me. And all I said was, is that it? And then Greg's eyes went like this, and he hit me with about 100 of them, felt like. And in Poughkeepsie, the ring is on the third floor. You got to go all the way down the steps to get to the bottom, to the dressing room. Here I am, you know, the enhancement talent gets out of the ring first, leave the superstar to get his hand raised in the announcement. But it seemed real quick, because as I'm getting to the second floor, I could hear the door open, and all I can hear is boom, 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 like the feet are coming down the stairs. I get to the bottom, there's the Briscoes, there's the Funks, there's Steamboat, right? And he comes running down and he stops and he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, kid, I knew you weren't that stupid. I just want to know who put you up to it. Was it the Funks? Was it the Briscoes? Or was it Steamboat?" And I just looked at him. I said, "I'm not at liberty to release my source, but thank you very much for the opportunity
I ain't no snitch.
to get into the ring." Yeah. So then, Jerry pulls me to the side and, he, gave me some words of wisdom. And he sent me out to San Antonio to Chavo Guerrero Sr. And that was a big break for me. It was one of those things that helped me out in the long run, to get me started, to learn the craft and learn my skills.
And what was it like? Because at that point, you had, of course, wrestled without a mask or a hood. And now in San Antonio, you are part of the hoods. Whose idea was that? And how long did it take you to get used to wrestling with the mask on?
Ooh, good question.
It was Chavo Guerrero Sr.'s. He wanted to do this Twin Devils gimmick that was very popular in the LA territory. They were real twins once they took the mask off. But Tony Torres was a referee for Bill Watts and the Mid-South territory. And he, going in with Paul Bosch and everything, was going to put me and Tony together with that same concept. So he put the mask on me first to come in as one, and then obviously became Hood 2. But the funny part about it is when I called, to get the starting date and everything else, he says, "I'm going to have you under a hood." And I say, "Okay, no problem." And I go through the whole conversation, but I said, "So what's the name of this character?" He goes, "The Hood." And I said, "Yeah, I know. Well, I understand, Chavo. I'm going to be with a hood." And he goes, "No, you don't." I go, "Well, yeah, that's what you're telling me, right?" I said, "But I just want to know the name of the character." And he goes, "It's the Hood." I go, "I know. I got the hood on my head. I understand that." He goes, "No, you dumbass. The name of the character is the Hood." I said, "Oh, okay."
Who's on first?
Now I got it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what it felt like to me. But yeah, he put it together, and we did and generated a lot of heat because we were switching in and out, and we were working with these two young guys. You might have heard of them, Shawn Michaels and Paul Diamond, back in those days. Yeah, Shawn was like 18 years old, so he was getting his licks in, and it worked out for the best. And I met a lot of people out there that were coming through that helped me move on to the other territories, like Wahoo McDaniel. He sent me to Florida, and then Bushwhacker Luke is the one who sent me to Puerto Rico. So, it was opened up a lot of doors. In that same territory was Tugboat. We were all part of that Malenko crew, Paul Diamond, Tugboat, and myself. Met Al Madrill there, and Gordman, and Gory Guerrero. It was interesting, to say the least.
Wow,
my full exposure of being on the road every day.
A lot of different generations involved, though, and all the names you got to run into. So I'm sure you, if you were smart, you listened and you picked up a lot of stuff, because it certainly showed over your career. I always enjoyed watching you. Obviously there were times wrestlers would pop up in a territory and then they would leave, and we would have no answers as kids and things of that nature. Where did they go? Where did my favorites go? And, that happened with you a couple of times when I was watching you on certain programs and things, but it was always great whenever you pop back up. I always enjoyed Ricky Santana in the ring.
Well, I appreciate that. And yes, I did pick everybody's brain because I wanted to learn every aspect of the business, because I knew at one point in time the body would give out, even though the brain would say, "You still got it." And, I had to be able to do the other things like creative and produce and things of that nature. So I'm thankful for those. And most of them that helped me out are no longer with us. God rest your soul. If I sit there and start to name off, all the people that brilliant-wise, mind-wise, like Dusty, like Kevin Sullivan, like Chavo Sr., all these, Eddie Graham, and all these great minds for the business, unfortunately, are no longer with us. But, I try to pass on everything that I learned along the way to the young talent.
Well, Ricky, you named all these legends that were, a lot of them were part of Texas All-Star Wrestling. Wahoo, and I know Brody was there. Another name associated with Texas All-Star Wrestling that may not be a legend to most, but he is to me, based on the stories I've heard about him. I want to hear if you've got a story. Fred Barron. Do you have a Fred Barron story? What an infamous character based on everything I've heard.
Fred was unique to say the least. You know, he. The only thing I question, you know, Fred's judgment on it, you know, with Chavo having that working relationship with Bill Watson Mid-South, you know, we slowly built the territory and we got to the big show, which was the Battle of the Alamo. And, you know, when I first got there, you know, I'm not going to kid you, you know, I came from all those houses that WWF was doing in the transition of buying everything up and, you know, making good money to, oh my God, you could hear crickets. You know, but I was out there, you know, and I worked 7 days a week, and my first paycheck, including TV, was for $385. So I said, did I make the right move? Because I was making more just, you know, doing the shots coming through Florida and TV than out there. But I wanted to learn this business. I wanted to perfect. But the mistake that I believe he made is that when Chavo went to Japan when the territory was hot, I guess we stepped on Fritz's toes because we would go into Wichita Falls, which is right outside of Dallas, and Lawton, Oklahoma, which were their two clubs. And back then you didn't really do that because, you know, everybody had their territory. And we were drawn better than they were. You know, we didn't have the Von Erichs. We just had us. We had the Guerreros. So I guess it worked out for us. But they sent Gary Hart down there, and we went from the hottest tag team with the most heat. In the course of the first week, we dropped the titles. In the second week, we dropped the mask. And in the third week, we did a loser leave town. So
not one of Gary's boys, huh?
No, well, not at that point, you know. But then, you know, I'd meet up with Gary again in Charlotte, you know, a couple of years later. But it's the nature of the beast, I guess. But I thought that was the biggest mistake because, you know, it was San Antonio, you know, at that time was like 85% Mexican descent. And we didn't have anybody. They took everything away. So I just knew the writing was on the wall. And you know, thankfully for me that Wahoo, you know, man of his word, he always promised me something and he always came through. He says, when you're done here, kid, I got a place for you in Florida. So I went down there. And then when I was in Puerto Rico, he came in for the anniversary and he was booking in the AWA. And he says, hey, when you're done here, I got a spot for you there too. But, you know, I went back to Atlanta and Charlotte when I left Puerto Rico. So never took him up on that offer, but he always held true to his word. So a lot of respect for Wahoo.
We were talking a little bit ago, you were talking about all the legends that you picked the brains of, but you also happen to be the veteran sometimes. Some of the other guys that broke in right around your time and certainly afterwards, and you got to team with a lot of those guys. When I was looking through some of the partners you had in Portland as the tag team champions, and it's so good to hear you're going to be part of the Portland Wrestling Expo. But I saw you had like grizzled vets like, Coco Samoa was your partner, but you also had a very young Brady Boone, Brad Anderson, Curtis Thompson.
Yeah.
And you got to work
against tag team of the year.
Yeah, I saw that. I love it. And Curtis Thompson was another guilty pleasure of mine because man, he just looked cool, right? He had the body, right?
Oh yeah, he had the body. You know, he was always funny and entertaining for me. But you know, I had worked with him, you know, when I was with the Crockett's, and he was, you know, we're doing TBS and everything else, and he was enhancement, but he came out. He went to Calgary first, and then he came down to Portland, and then down into Puerto Rico. Same with Brad Anderson. I got him booked in when I was doing the booking in Puerto Rico. I brought Brad in, you know, because Gene was so good to me in the Crockett territory.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense because I see some of these names that are in Portland here that you worked with. They also do wind up popping up in Puerto Rico when you're there. So now it all comes back together for me. But I was looking at some of the matches when you were teaming with Curtis, and who went on, by the way, for everybody out there, a Firebreaker Chip fame in WCW.
Yep.
I still haven't figured out what a Firebreaker is, but it is what it is. You guys got to work with a team in Portland by the name of the Juice Patrol, which was Art Barr, I think, and J.W. Storm. But back then it was like Big Juice and Little Juice, Beetlejuice, whatever you want to call them. Art Barr in that team. What was that like, working with Art Barr?
Well, you know, Art was a night off. You know, he could do it all. You know, Big Juicer was going through his growing pains, as I like to call it. It was Roddy Piper's deal. But the whole story behind that is that, you know, we have been baby faces out there for so long. And Roddy says, hey, listen, you know, all the tag matches were 2 out of 3 falls on TV back then. And he says, listen, we're going to turn you guys heel. I said, what? He says, yeah, we're going to turn you heel because that's what we're going to do. And I'm thinking, damn, I just got 1,500 pictures of me that came in the mail. So, you know, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, Rod, I mean, this is, you know, that's what you want to do. So I got Steve Dahl. And I say, hey, Dahl, you got the interview before me at the Crow's Nest. I want you to take out my picture, take the Sharpie, and write the boycott, you know, on it, and then leave the picture out there. And he says, okay. I said, yeah, just do that for me. So he goes out, and I walk out, and Don Costa's there, and I snatch that picture. I go, did you do this, Costa? You're the one that boycotted me. He said, I don't ever want to see any of these in any arena I go through because I don't know nothing to anybody. And I went into this big heel promo, right? And I tore up the picture. Well, guess what? We come in, and Sandy, Art's dad, was the guy who was in charge of selling the pictures, right? He comes in and he goes, hey, you got any more of those pictures? I said, yeah, why? He goes, because they're selling like hotcakes. I said, well, I got 1,500 of them, buddy. so let's go, you know. So Roddy said to me, he goes, man, that was quick thinking, kid. I said, you know, Roddy, you just could have gave me the heads up. He goes, nah, it's better to get an actual reaction when you don't know it's coming. I said, all right, you know, and then, you know, the money that I was making off the pictures, if it wasn't for Steve, you know, I told him, I said, hey, look, here's your cut, you know, and we go around the whole loop. We're going to do the same thing. So I got to get rid of these pictures, you know. And he said, sure thing. You know, it was gas and beer money. So, you know, it was worth every bit of it. But those are the kind of things that most people don't realize, that you got to be quick-witted and be able to do things on the fly when they need to be done on the fly.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
If you're just tuning in now, we made the announcement a bit earlier. Ricky Santana is joining the guest list for February 22nd's Portland Wrestling Expo at the Holiday Inn Portland Airport. He's going to join his old friend Top Gun, the Grappler, Sheep Herder, Luke Williams, Rikishi will be there. A lot more names are going to be announced in the weeks and months to come. Now, Ricky, when you first got to Portland, the Portland Sports Arena was home to the action every Saturday night. What are your memories stepping into that old bowling alley, and then maybe a funny story or two that you can tell us?
The first one is, you know, here I am leaving the Florida territory. That you know, it was going good. You know, I was making good money. It was time to go. But in Florida, if you got rain, the houses were down because nobody wanted to go out into the rain and everything else. So I get into Portland, and, you know, I get my rental car, and I said the Portland Sports Arena, and they tell me the directions, right? But it's raining. It's raining. And I'm thinking, you know, this is going to be horrible, you know? This is one of those kind of things, you know? And then I come around, and there's a line all the way around the building. And I'm like, wow. But what amazed me was, just like every other building back in the day, from the Junction in San Antonio, from the Sportatorium in Tampa to the Portland Sports Arena, it looked like this big building, you know, on TV. And when I get there and I go, this looks like a bowling alley. I mean, it's been converted. And that's what it was, you know, but they would pack them in there every Saturday night, and the people were faithful to their Portland wrestlers. And my hat's off to them, because it was unique in the sense of the feeling that you get with the crowd, because they were definitely into it. You know, like Puerto Rican fans, they're always into it. You know, it's just one of those feelings that you can't really put your finger on. You just know when you walk out, here it is, you know. And I kind of introduced the music theme out there too. You know, it was starting to get a little popular, you know, in the territories, and it wasn't out there. So I say, hey, Rip, you know, can I use ring music? He goes, you got something to play? I said, yeah, I got something to play. And, you know, they bought into it, you know, and I came out a mixture of Jimmy Garvin and the Rock and Roll Express. I had bandanas and I had a tuxedo and tails. So it was something different, and they bought, you know, me as that type of personality. And, you know, I thanked everybody for it. And then they hated me when I was a heel, which was okay too, because that was my job. It's one of those things, especially when, you know, I had my valet, Terry Park, you know, she was big and different, so we were different. So people didn't like that either. And then they didn't like me and Al Madrill, because Al Madrill knocked everybody. So, you know, it was just kind of like, it was a perfect territory to learn, because a lot of the guys did learn out there, you know, like you said, like a Brady Boone, like a Curtis Thompson, like a Brad Anderson, and Scott Doring. There was a few guys out there that were getting groomed to move on to bigger and better things.
It seems like, that was the tail end of the territory era, though. And so a lot of those guys we did see start to develop in Portland, they really had nowhere else to go after that if the big two didn't want them, which is kind of unfortunate. Now, going back real quick to, you were talking about your look that you developed there. It was the 80s, so you could get away with that. It looked good for the 1980s, so it worked. You got away with it.
Yeah, my mullet was kicking, It was, it was
one of the better ones.
Deal.
I'll give you that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And now I'm more like a Stone Cold rock look now.
I like that. It works too. That's I'm getting there. So, but, one more question from me, Ricky, and I'll let Nick take it over from there. I want to fast forward to you had various runs in the NWA and WCW. You would come in and out, and it's like stop and start. It was so unfortunate because again, I was a Ricky Santana fan, so when you would just randomly disappear again, it would suck. But later on, I would find out there was this tag team in WCW by the name of Los Especialistas, and they were under hoods. And eventually they get unmasked. And in the minute you see something like that happen to a team like that, you think, oh, no, it's over. But you go on with Fidel to become the Barrio Brothers after that. And you guys were there for quite a stretch throughout the mid-'90s. So I got to ask you, they clearly didn't have a lot for you. They weren't putting you guys in the main events or the tag team scene or anything like that. But was there a big proponent backstage? Was it Kevin Sullivan or someone else that said, we got to keep these guys around? They're great hands to have.
Well, what it really broke down to is, Kevin being there, Kevin being a Florida boy and working with him in, in the Florida territories and being on the road and in Charlotte. Kevin lived with me for about 3 or 4 months when he was moving up from Daytona. So, I really think that was a major part of us going there. But they also knew that we could work with anybody.
Right.
I mean, we were already, veterans of 10 years or better. And didn't matter if they stuck us in. I was talking to Buff Bagwell when they were teaming him up with Too Cold and Scotty Riggs and everything else. But he said to me, he goes, man, we knew it was a night off when we saw, you and Fidel's name. We didn't have to worry about anything because if we messed something up, you guys would cover it and we'd look like $1 million. Mm-hmm. So, and then we did a lot of things with Sting and Luger and the Nasties and the Armstrongs and anybody that, you wanted a good rating TV type of match, then, we were married to Harlem Heat for a while too. That was a growing pains, and I was kidding, Stevie and Booker about it. But we're all good with that. I used to say, hey, just to mess with them, because I was born in New York, right? So I go, hey man, what street's the Apollo on? And they would look at me like, what? Is it the east side? Is it the west side? What street's it on? And he just looked at me, steered. I go, just so you know, it's on the west side of Manhattan on 125th and Broadway.
You remember?
And they
that.
look at me, huh? Yeah. He goes, how do you know that? Because I only lived 8 blocks up the road from there. Okay, I was in the Spanish part of Harlem, and they started laughing and everything else. But throughout the years, we looked out for them because I knew what was going to happen with them. They had to look. They had Sherry with them. You can see who's going to make and who's not after you've been in the business for quite some time. You don't really make too many errors in judgment in that case, So, we were married to them and we, did our job, and now we go in and out, coming through, go to Japan, come back through WCW, go down to Mexico, come back through. Got to take care of the family, got to feed the kids, and you got to stay busy. I would go everywhere and anywhere to make $1.
Ricky, before we get to the plugs, you could take as long as you want on this last question. Now, we're celebrating all things Pacific Northwest in Portland coming up with the Portland Wrestling Expo, the Owen family's contributions to wrestling. But over the last few years, I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole. And in 1988, there was another promotion that popped up, and it got on Don Owen's shit list, for lack of a better term. I know you were a part of that as Billy Jack Haynes, Oregon Wrestling Federation. Can you tell us as much as you'd like about the OWF?
Well, the OWF had a great concept. It was, kind of based off of what, WWF was doing. He brought in a lot of good talent. And looked at it. I needed somewhere to go. And for better judgment, I made the mistake. And the mistake I think that Billy made was trying to do it in the summer, because in that territory, you get 3 months of sun. The rest of the time it's raining or snowing. So I compared it to the Germans tried to invade Russia in the wintertime and lost. And that's what happened there. But once again, my brother from another mother, 35 years or better, Fidel Sierra, talked to Don Owen. And he worked his magic, and I came back in. But the first thing I did is I walked into Don's office. I apologized to him. I said, you gave me a break. I needed somewhere to go, and I should have came to you first. But the carrot that they were dangling was pretty close. So I had to take a shot at it, and I apologize, and I want to thank you for giving me another opportunity. So, we go Saturday, it's TV. I get back from my match, and Don's in the dressing room. He goes, come here, everybody. Come here. And he brings everybody in the room. All right, look at this dumb son of a bitch over here. He wanted to run opposition to me. I took care of him for years, and this is how he repaid me. And I know you all got that dumbass look on your faces. Well, what's he doing back here now if he screwed you over, Don? He was man enough to come into my office and apologize. And besides, I like the kid, and he's made me money, so hopefully he'll make me some more money. But if you do it again, Santana, you're fucking out of here. No problem. No problem, Don. And, he was always good to me. And that's one of the mistakes I think that, I made along my career in the business that maybe I shouldn't have done, because Don was always good to me. So I have to kind of give the devil his due in the sense that I messed up, not him.
Well, it took a lot of courage to go in there and apologize. And I'm sure, obviously that went a long way with Don, because you were with the territory for pretty much the next 3 years until it closed up. So it says a lot about you too, Ricky.
Well, I appreciate that. I always feel that business is business, and you don't want to burn any bridges, and you always want to keep the door open, because you never know in this business.
Well, Ricky, I don't know, if Nick's got anything left for you. I just want to say, before you do some plugs here at the end of this segment, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of the show, because, it's been a long time, going back to my childhood watching you as I grew up. So it's kind of cool to have you here and just have some conversation to get some of these stories out here.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. I'm always open to reminiscing, because it keeps me young, even though I'm not young anymore. But as long as I can remember, I think I'm ahead of the game.
Well, you look great, Ricky, and we're going to have you back on again as it gets closer to the Portland Wrestling Expo, February 22nd, holiday in Portland Airport. Yeah. Ricky, why don't you tell everyone where they can follow you on social media?
Yeah, on Facebook. You just got to look up Ricky Santana. You'll see my pretty mug. And there'll be an old picture there of when I was young. I think it's a picture of me and Muta, to be exact. And then, you can follow me on Instagram the same way. Just look up Ricky Santana. I think it's 5205. I don't really remember all that. Just punch in my name. You'll see my mug, and you'll know it's me. And, I like to hear from those fans from the different territories that I was in. Obviously, I still keep in contact with the office in Puerto Rico. I do a lot of work for them. But the fans that were out in the Northwest, they were always good to me. They always treated me right. And I'm looking forward to seeing them, because I used to drive by that Holiday Inn all the time. Every time I come into town, and, whether it was raining or whether it was sunny for 3 months, there were always great fans in all the towns from Portland to Seaside to, McMinnville, and you keep going down to Grants Pass, and you'd have Medford and Roseburg and Salem. It was interesting, to say the least. The ones that really confused me were the names in Washington. You'd have Yakima and Wenatchee and all these, Indian names, and sometimes I'd have to, how do you say that? How do you say that? But, I would go out there and promote them. But it was always a good territory. It was a tight-knit territory, because obviously the roster was on a less of a scale than the other territories that we were at. But, everybody got along, everybody helped, and everybody strived for the same cause, and that's keep Don Owen in business, and everybody makes some money and make a living. So I'm grateful for Don Owen and everything in the Owens family, including Elton and Barry, for everything they did out there in the Northwest. It was really special for me.
Thank you again for coming on, Ricky. And like I said, if you missed that, once again, Ricky Santana is joining the guest list. check out the Portland Wrestling Expo Saturday, February 22nd. Ricky reunites with Top Gun, the Grappler, Sheep Herder Luke, Rikishi, and a bunch of other great names. Make sure to keep it tuned to the Captain's Corner for all the breaking news on the Portland Wrestling Expo.
Thank you, gentlemen, and look forward to coming back on and getting everybody to come out to that Portland Wrestling Expo. You want to be there. You don't want to miss it because this is the first of its kind. And thank you, Nick, for giving me the invite there. And, looking forward to it all. And, maybe I'll slap the grappler around a few more times. I don't know, No, I love him. He's good people.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Wow, what an awesome interview. You outdo yourself week after week here, Nick. I mean, it's been one after the other. We've had the Grappler, we've had Top Gun, and now Ricky Santana on here. Great stories from throughout his career, from Puerto Rico to Portland to the WCW and beyond. And I can't wait to have him back on here. I got to start drilling out some new questions here and putting them down and keeping them somewhere on my laptop because, man, I'm looking forward to having him back here. He's great memory, going from the WWF even, right?
We could have talked to Ricky for another hour. If we didn't have the limited time for our weekly podcast or bi-weekly podcast, Ricky has been everywhere, wrestled everyone, that's had a name, professional wrestling, and spent so much time in so many territories. And that's kind of what a big part of a Captain's Corner was built on. And, leading to what's coming up in Portland, I knew we had to get Ricky on the show, and I knew we had to break the news here on the Captain's Corner podcast, right?
No, yeah, it's absolutely a great time. Another name added, and of course, you already announced Rikishi as well in this episode. And Ricky just confirmed with very cool. You're building it week by week, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next year. Going back to another name you mentioned because we kind of glossed over it last time, and he was certainly a big part of the territory at one point. And I'm talking about Sheep Herder Luke Williams, who had teamed obviously with Butch Miller. Everybody knows him as the Bushwhackers, even the Sheep Herders in most of the territories throughout the 80s, but also Lord Jonathan Boyd, who was, did his own shtick before that with like Norman Frederick Charles III. But Luke Williams, there's that famous match out there, the hair match where he gets his head shaved. So everybody, it's like, but once upon a time, the Bushwhackers had hair, guys. And I remember the first time I saw those tapes back in the 90s tape training. That was huge, right? Because look at the names that were involved in the territory in Portland at that time, 1980. It was Piper and Rick Martel feuding with Buddy Rose and the Sheep Herders. Oh, my God, look at the talent involved. And, of course, one by one, the hair gets shaved, Butch and Luke. And just to see Luke, though, you've seen Bushwhacker Luke. You grew up on the Sheep Herder Luke. And you go back and say, oh, my God, he had blonde flowing locks. What's that about,
Oh, no, absolutely. That was one of those things when I remember reading McAdams' tape list. And that was something he probably talked about, the footage from Portland where, Butch and Luke had hair. And like you said, you go back and you finally see it. And you could tell it's them, but it's just not used to how you've seen them before. And that was, Of course, their first big territory. I think it was their first territory in the United States. And what a career they both had. Rest in peace, Butch. Luke will be with us at the Portland Wrestling Expo. We got to have Ricky on again as it gets closer, Ray. We're talking about doing a watch-along with Top Gun, with Ricky, with the Grappler. I can't wait to hear and dive into what matches. Maybe we'll let the people decide. You guys will give a few options up of what matches you guys can pick from and then vote, and that's the match that we'll do. What do you think about that, Ray?
Well, as we get closer, absolutely. What I'll do is I'll start going through my gigantic vault of videos here, Nick, and I'll look up some of their matches from, their time in the Portland territory or wherever, and we'll put up some polls. I'll put them up on social media, put them up on my Patreon, and see what people want to see, and we'll add the video cast straight there to the YouTube, to the WrestleCopia YouTube, and we'll watch along with these guys talking about some of their infamous or maybe famous matches. You never know when they're heels what's going to happen, but it's going to be interesting to get these guys back on and watch some of their old-timey matches, which they weren't old-timey to me. I mean, I grew up on them.
Oh, me too. And that's one of the main things we have in common, Ray. We both love us some old school territory wrestling and watch-alongs with the guys that were in the matches, makes it even more special. So I look forward to when we start doing that, maybe in the weeks to come for sure, sooner rather than later.
Well, as we begin to wrap things up here, Nick, I just encourage everybody to stop over to my social media. You guys can follow me. Well, first of all, head over to WrestleCopia.com. We've got like a dozen podcasts going and still growing over there, from regional wrestling to the Wrestling Memory Grenade, some of the original podcasts, but also the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop, Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert, and just added this past week the former managing editor of the Pro Wrestling Illustrated, creator of the PWI 500. In fact, he wrote the first two by himself. Bob Smith has joined the WrestleCopia brand, and the Outdated Wrestling Hour podcast, now part of WrestleCopia.
That is very cool, Ray. I used to say, Capt, the hardest working man in the virtual game. Well, you are the hardest working man in the podcast game. Well, I know this is your last episode of the week, but the performance that you had on today made it seem like it was the first. Thank you for everything you do, not only with this show, Ray, but with the entire WrestleCopia network. Oh,
absolutely. It's a pleasure, guys. If you guys want to find me, I'm over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. You guys can also follow me over on Facebook. Something like 21,000 followers right now. Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And for those video casts coming up that we're going to do here on the Captain's Corner, YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. Be sure to subscribe today. Nick, I know you got a few social medias as well.
Yeah, check us out, Captain's Corner on Facebook and also on Instagram. And Saturday night at about 8:45, 9 o'clock, we'll be live streaming with Lucha Underground, NXT, AEW veteran Eva Lise. We'll have photos, cards. We'll even have her new figure. A lot of cool stuff. You come in, you buy any of those, you can ask some questions. Free looks as well. So check us out. Like I said, we're always streaming live from Facebook. And make sure to listen to all the back episodes of the Captain's Corner podcast, because I feel like me and Ray we're gotten into our groove. We've had some great guests, and we couldn't do well you guys taking the time to listen to us. So thank you so much for any time that you're putting into giving us some time of your day.
Absolutely. All right, Nick, I think it's time to wrap things up here. Hope you guys enjoyed the interview with Ricky Santana as much as Nick and I did. I'm looking forward to seeing who we have on here next. You never know what Nick's got going on. Sometimes Nick doesn't know.
Amen.
But we'll finish it up right now, guys. We're going to end another episode of the Captain's Corner Pod. I want to thank you again so much, Nick, for letting me be a part.
Cheers to the working man.